Well, there's much to talk about. Let's get to our panel right now. Joining us here in Washington is Michael Fletcher. He covered economic policy as a correspondent for the Washington Post and is currently a senior writer for ESPN's The Undefeated. Tucker Doherty is a reporter for Politico. Simon Marks is the president and chief correspondent for Feature Story News. He joins us from their headquarters here in Washington. And Leonard Steinhorn is a political strategist and professor of public communication at American University. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Simon, let me start with you. Stories don't come bigger than this in the afternoon, do they?
Absolutely seismic moment here in Washington, D.C. In many ways, it is a Tuesday afternoon, Tuesday night massacre. Donald Trump moving against James Comey just a matter of hours after it became apparent that he had misled Congress last week in testimony that he offered here in Washington, D.C., testimony in which he had claimed that hundreds of thousands of emails from Hillary Clinton's private server had ended up on an unsecured computer. We now know that he had substantially overstated that case and those numbers in his congressional testimony last week, and indeed was preparing to correct the record when he got the news that Donald Trump was firing him. But tantalizingly, we now know that Donald Trump wasn't firing him because of what happened on Capitol Hill last week. It's clear from those letters that Sean was reading excerpts from at the top of the program that he's being fired because back in July of 2016, he did not pursue prosecutions against Hillary Clinton and some of the people around her over her use of a private email server. And remember that throughout the presidential campaign, wherever he went, Donald Trump's supporters always used to chant, "Lock her up," about Hillary Clinton, and were chanting it just a few days ago. So now we're in the extraordinary position where Donald Trump, a man who many Democrats believe has James Comey to thank for his election victory last November, is now firing the FBI director who has been in the lead role investigating alleged collusion by the Trump team with the Russian government last year. It doesn't come much bigger than that.
Right, there's all kinds of speculation going on in Washington right now. Lenny, put this in some kind of political context for us. As Simon pointed out, this is the equivalent of an earthquake here in Washington, the firing of the FBI director.
Well, look, it's the equivalent of an earthquake. It could be a nothing burger. It could be much ado about nothing. It could be that they just felt that James Comey had lost the confidence of the people in the FBI and wasn't doing his job and made a mistake. But it could also have a whiff of Watergate to it. When you sort of are worried that the FBI may be getting close to sort of investigating things that involve you, involve your friends, involve your campaign, involve your election and the legitimacy of your election, it may well be that they want to be able to have the FBI pull back on that and put somebody in place who may be more partisan or more willing to carry water for Donald Trump and his administration.
Michael, what do you make of it?
It's almost kind of a through the looking glass moment. When you read through the Deputy Attorney General's letter and his kind of rationale for this firing, one's left to conclude, if you believe the letter, that the reason Comey's going is because of Donald Trump's discomfort with how Comey handled the Clinton investigation. And in some ways, what people would say were some of the moves he made that disadvantaged Clinton in the campaign. He talked about when Comey had the press conference, to say, well, there's nothing here with the server investigation. And then it was disclosed that he had reopened the investigation in the final weeks of the campaign. And Trump says, well, or the Deputy Attorney General says, that wasn't professional. That wasn't the way FBI director should handle this. And if we're to believe the letter, Trump is upset about that. And there's no mention of Russia. He's not upset about that, according to the letters. And right. He has to go. So it's really surreal.
But if we look at the reason that the White House is unhappy with James Comey, because at best he misled Congress in his testimony, at worst he lied to Congress, is that a fireable offense, do you think?
Well, I guess, with the president's power over the FBI director, I guess, what he deems to be fireable is fireable. Mm-hmm. But it's hard. It doesn't pass kind of the common sense test, right? I mean, I think clearly the president has the power to do this and he has the discretion to do this. But one would have to think, well, if Comey misspoke, right, before Congress, or if he intentionally misspoke, if you wanted to take it that far, you'd wonder why Donald Trump would be that upset about it.
Right, and it's not just a bureaucratic action that the president is taking. There's a huge political dimension to this.
Oh, no question about it. Yeah. No question about it. And this is another thing. I mean, the power of the presidency is such that, you know, he sort of determines the credibility of a lot of these agencies. People continue, as much as Washington's divided, as polarized as our country has become. Most of the country still believes, like, you know, FBI is kind of unassailable. I mean, at least, you know, I would say 80% of Americans, I don't know the number, but the vast majority do. And this now kind of pulls them into, you know, further into the political fray. They were already uncomfortably there because of what Comey did and didn't do during the campaign. But now I think this pulls it further. Now people are going to look at the Russia investigation and whatever becomes of that kind of through this prism, I believe.
Tucker, there's all kinds of speculation in the media right now on why James Comey was fired. Of course, people have their own reasons. At least one major international network here in the United States is saying that he was fired because the investigation got too close to Donald Trump, and that, in the words of one commentator on that network, he's going to be replaced by a stooge, someone who could do the bidding of Donald Trump. Is the media getting ahead of itself here?
Well, I think there's certainly a lot of speculation, and there's not a lot of to go off of at this point. I think one thing that makes this event kind of special relative to what's been happening thus far with all of this sort of palace intrigue around the investigations is that so far it's been a drip, drip, drip. You really have to be paying attention to these events to put pieces together and understand the whole narrative. But this is sort of a more straightforward major event, perhaps. It's easy for the type of non-college educated, less media engaged voter to see something like this and say, oh, someone's being fired and that person who's being fired was involved in investigations. So while there's a lot to speculate at this point, and the media might be overstepping its bounds, on the other hand, I think this is the kind of story that could resonate and could become something larger because of that. It's understandable.
Go ahead, Lenny.
It reminds me of William Shakespeare's line, "She doth protest too much," okay? He doth protest too much by saying that it seems as if they are firing him because he gave inaccurate information to Congress on Hillary Clinton's situation, exaggerating what actually happened with the emails with Hillary Clinton. When is the Trump administration ever going to defend Hillary Clinton? It just doesn't happen. In fact, just today they were talking about putting out a video of the Hillary Clinton concession call to Donald Trump, almost like to rub her nose into it. And all of a sudden, by firing Jim Comey for saying the wrong thing about Hillary Clinton, they're defending her. They doth protest too much. There may be a backstory to this, and I think that's why the media are all over this.
Right. But I think it's going to be interesting to see a couple of things going forward, because I think about Rosenstein and his reputation as a U.S. attorney in Maryland was pretty impeccable. I mean, right. He's relatively new there. He's not a Trump insider. You'd wonder why he'd be party to something that, you know, we could speculate, you know, sort of about the true reasons of it. And that's an interesting thing. And I think a lot's going to be sort of determined by who they find to replace, you know, Mr. Comey.
Let me go to Simon. Simon, why now?
And there is rarely in Washington, D.C., smoke without fire. And the reality is that if you look at the timing of this, it comes 24 hours after what was a disastrous day for Donald Trump yesterday. The former acting Attorney General, the woman that he fired, Sally Yates, confirming to Congress that she had warned the White House that President Trump's first choice for national security advisor, the man he fired, General Michael Flynn, was a blackmail risk because the Department of Justice came to conclude that the Russians knew that underlying conduct, and she didn't go into detail about what she meant by that phrase, but underlying conduct by Michael Flynn left him open to possible blackmail by the Russians. The Trump team then for 18 days kept Michael Flynn in place. At the White House briefing today, once again, they had no explanation for why Michael Flynn was still attending top-level classified meetings for 18 days after President Trump was warned his national security advisor was a blackmail risk. By firing the FBI director, Donald Trump is taking a very dramatic move that changes the conversation here in the United States tonight. You won't be seeing any of that Sally Yates testimony on television here this evening, but he's also underscoring the fact that he is extremely nervous about where all of those investigations into alleged collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians last year, where all of those investigations are heading.
All right, Simon, on that point of him being nervous, What is the political fallout here? The one view is that this was a White House under siege and acted out of desperation. The other was that this is the White House taking the initiative and, as you point out, once again, controlling what's coming out.
Well, I think he will argue, Donald Trump will argue, that he's taken decisive steps here. Interestingly, in that letter, and you heard Sean reading from it at the start of the programme, he claims that on 3 separate occasions, ex-director Jim Comey of the FBI has assured Donald Trump that he personally is not the target of any investigations. I think it'll be interesting to see whether anybody thinks that perhaps he's disclosed a bit of classified information in that letter. But clearly, this notion of investigations getting closer to him and to the people around him is something that troubles him. You could see that in his activity on social media over the last 24 hours. There was a real Donald Trump tweet storm over the last several hours following that testimony of Sally Yates on Capitol Hill. It is impossible then to view the firing of James Comey through a closed prism. I mean, this is part and parcel of a series of events here over the last 24 to 36 hours that have obviously worried Donald Trump. And the question now will be, who does he pick to fill James Comey's shoes?